A Biblical Approach to the Evidences for God, Jesus, and the Bible, Part 7. Bible writers required substantial evidence to convince them to believe. They were not gullible or easily persuaded by weak or deceitful people. They required proof before they would accept the facts. Thomas had doubts about the resurrection until he personally saw proof. The apostles had doubts about the resurrection till they saw convincing proof. Paul persecuted Christians till Jesus appeared to him personally. Sometimes people are skeptical because so much of our evidence is given by personal friends of Jesus. Actually, we'll see the enemies also give much useful evidence, though we wouldn't expect them to do so willingly. However, the apostles themselves were doubters and unbelievers until they were convinced by the evidence that they personally witnessed. These men were not easily persuaded to believe the message they later preached. Only overwhelming evidence would have led them to believe such amazing events. Their refusal to believe, except on the basis of strong evidence, not only demonstrates their honesty, but also provides additional certainty to their testimony to us. The messages they preached made great changes in the lives of the Bible writers. As already noted, the apostles were confused, unbelieving, self-seeking men until Jesus died and rose. Much of what Jesus taught was confused to them because they had misconceptions about his kingdom. They sought personal glory instead of Jesus' purpose. They fled when Jesus was arrested, and Peter denied him repeatedly while he was on trial. When they refused to believe the evidence of his resurrection after they began to hear people say they had seen him alive. Less than 2 months later, however, those same men stood boldly before the very same people who had crucified Jesus and proclaimed him to be Jesus as the resurrected Lord and Christ. When arrested for this message, they stood before the highest council of the Jewish leaders and openly rebuked them for having unjustly slain Jesus. When beaten and commanded not to continue preaching about Jesus, they rejoiced to suffer for his cause and boldly continued preaching openly. Acts 9, 1-30, Paul traveled great distances to find Christians and imprison and persecute them. He blasphemed and voted to put the Christians to death. Suddenly, he ceased his opposition, was baptized, and immediately began preaching Christ in the synagogues. This amazed people because they knew he was preaching the very message he had previously sought to destroy. What could possibly explain this swift, overwhelming, direct turnabout in these men? Their explanation was that they truly had seen Jesus alive from the dead, and he and the Holy Spirit had revealed to them the proper understanding of the events surrounding his death and resurrection. What other explanation can honestly and adequately explain such changes? Bible writers faced overwhelming persecution, yet never recanted. If these men did not really receive the revelations they claimed to receive, and if they didn't really witness the things they claimed to witness, they would have been false teachers, liars, deceivers, and hypocrites, and they would have known this to be the case. Consider now the treatment they received for their preaching and testimony. Would they have been willing to continue to preach this message under these circumstances, knowing that it wasn't true? Prophets in every age were persecuted and even slain including those who preached to God's chosen nation Israel. Even Moses, although he was greatly honored by later generations of Jews, had been continually criticized and disobeyed by Israel during his own lifetime. Jesus repeatedly warned that similar treatment would be given to his apostles and disciples. Exactly as Jesus had predicted, the apostles were imprisoned, beaten, and even slain for preaching the gospel. Paul was an eminent example of one who suffered for his testimony regarding Jesus. Read the record in Acts from his conversion in chapter 9 until it ends with Paul a prisoner awaiting trial in Rome in Acts 28. In virtually every city where he went, he was persecuted, imprisoned, beaten, and or had to flee for his life. None of the apostles ever became wealthy. None was ever held in high esteem by society in general. None was ever elected to high political office. None was ever honored as a great social or military leader. Instead, all suffered a lifetime of persecution, imprisonment, beatings, rejection, and ridicule, and nearly all died for their testimony regarding Jesus. Who would willingly suffer a lifetime of opposition and even martyrdom for a testimony they knew to be a lie? What evidence can be presented that convincingly demonstrates the Bible writers to be false witnesses? Where is the proof that they are dishonest, deceitful liars? There is none. If there is none, then surely we should recognize testimony as convincing attempts to honestly state the facts that they truly experienced as eyewitnesses. End of part 7.